You ever walk into a house that feels like it's holding its breath? That's what hit me the second I stepped through the front door of my childhood home on Pine Ridge Way. It should have smelled like cinnamon and fake pine spray. Instead, it smelled like lemon cleaner burnt coffee and something faintly metallic, like blood in snow. I'm Callie Monroe. I'm 29, Portland-based freelance content strategist, aka I get paid to write tweets for people with trust funds and too much teeth whitener. I haven't been home in 3 years, not since my mom accidentally forgot to mention my sister Claire's engagement party. I wasn't invited, not because of a fight or anything, just omitted. This year it was Grandpa Earl who called, not my mom, not my dad, certainly not Claire. Grandpa's voice cracked on the line. Said he missed me. Said he might not be around next Christmas. I booked a flight an hour later, and now here I was. Suitcase in one hand, the other, hesitating over the doorknob of a house that once knew every version of me tomboy, Callie angsty, teen Callie disappointment to the family, Callie. It was December 23rd, just after 8 p.m. The porch light was off. No wreath, no music, just one faint light coming from the kitchen window. I knocked, waited, knocked again, nothing, so I pushed the door open. The lock wasn't even latched. Grandpa, I called into the dim hallway. I heard a clink of cutlery, then a chair scraping slowly. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was there, slouched at the table in his old wool cardigan, staring at a half-eaten ham sandwich like it held all the answers to life. The TV was off. The room was silent. One bulb flickered overhead. Callie, he said as if surprised, you came. You invited me. He blinked slowly. Did I? That's when I realized something was off. His eyes were red. Not teary, raw. His sweater was buttoned wrong. His sandwich was barely touched. And taped to the fridge, fluttering slightly from the heat vent, was a torn piece of notebook paper. Change of plans, Aspen. Back Jane 5. Grandpa has everything he needs, Jay. I stared at it, then turned back to him. They left. They went to Aspen. He nodded, then looked down like he was ashamed. They said it was last minute. Weather window or something. Did they know I was coming? They said you probably wouldn't. That stung more than I expected. Like being ghosted by your own blood. I pulled out a chair, sat across from him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You okay? I asked. He nodded. Eating okay. He nodded again. What's going on, Grandpa? He finally looked at me, eyes watery, voice low. I think they're selling the house. My stomach dropped. What? He looked away again. They had some people come by last week, said it was for insurance appraisal, but they took measurements, photos, asked about roof dates. I sat back, heart thudding. Did you sign anything? No, he said quickly, but they've been pushing. Janet said I was making it harder on everyone. I stood up, heart racing, and opened the fridge just to do something. Inside a carton of milk 2 days past, expiration 1 slice of pie, and a bottle of white wine with Claire's name on the tag. The kitchen was clean. Too clean, like no one had cooked in it for days. Have they called texted? He shook his head. Claire sent a photo yesterday. Mountains, hot cocoa. Of course she did. I paced the kitchen, chewing my thumb. They left him here. In the middle of winter. With no explanation. With a single line taped to the fridge like a note to the babysitter. You're not going to Aspen? I asked. He chuckled bitterly. I wasn't invited. That made 2 of us. I pulled out my phone and checked our family group chat. Last message Claire 2 weeks ago sharing a discount code for protein powder. No mention of a trip. No heads up. No Merry Christmas. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was intentional. I'm gonna stay, I said firmly, until they're back. He looked at me startled. You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, someone has to make sure this place doesn't mysteriously get listed while you're sleeping. He smiled weakly. Thank you. We didn't talk much more that night. I made tea. He dozed off in his chair, and I wandered the house in silence. When I got to the 2nd floor, the air was colder. The hallway darker than I remembered. My room was untouched, but everything else felt off. Like someone had rearranged things just enough to make them wrong. An uncanny valley of memory. Then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, where the attic stairs folded down the cord, was hanging lower than it should have been. I pulled it, climbed the creaky steps, flashlight in hand. The attic smelled like mothballs and stale regret. Boxes stacked neatly labeled in my mother's sharp handwriting, China, Claire Xmas, 2020 Dad's Tools. But near the back under a tarp, I found a locked wooden trunk, not labeled. I tapped on it, hollow. Next to it was a torn envelope addressed to Ashwood Legal Group, Attention Estate Transition Division. Inside a single sheet, confirming updated estate directive transfer of property to Janet Monroe upon sale. Confirm no mention of Callie Monroe or Earl Monroe in final deed. My breath hitched. They weren't just selling the house. They were erasing us. Grandpa and me deleted from paper and memory. And somehow I knew. This was only the beginning. It's strange how quickly warmth can turn into warning. That attic had once been my hideaway dusty board games, forgotten sweaters, a weird porcelain clown no one ever admitted to buying. But now it felt like the beginning of a crime scene. Quiet, watchful, accusing. I sat cross-legged on the creaky floorboards holding the unsigned estate transfer note, like it was a smoking gun. My fingers trembled not from the cold, but from clarity. They weren't just moving Grandpa out, they were planning to scrub us both from the deed entirely. I scanned the surrounding boxes. Most were stacked neatly, but one near the back had clearly been disturbed. The flaps didn't line up. The tape had been sliced. Inside, under a pile of old Christmas ornaments and a cracked photo frame of Claire holding a snow globe, was a black plastic case, VHS-sized, labeled in faded marker, Ashwood MTG Septsensis. I hadn't seen a tape recorder in years, but I knew where one was. Grandpa had kept it downstairs in the garage tucked in a drawer beside his tools, like he was saving it for a rainy apocalypse. I grabbed the case and hurried down 2 flights, my heart thudding like a warning drum. In the garage, it took some fiddling and a bit of dust-induced sneezing. But the old machine whirred to life. Static buzzed. Then silence. Then voices. My mother's first, cool, steady, coded in false patience. "We can't wait until he dies, Michael. That house is the only asset worth anything. If we don't get it transferred before next quarter, we lose our investment window." Then Dad. "Janet, he's still lucid. You saw how sharp he was last week." Lucid, he thought Claire was his sister. A pause. Laughter. Not friendly. "We edit the will. Cut out Callie Lock Earl into a care agreement. Get Ashwood to notarize it quietly. I'll handle the signing." More silence. Then a third voice I didn't recognize. "We'll need a physician's note to confirm diminished capacity. That's the legal weak spot." Done. "Claire's got a connection at the clinic." I hit pause. For a second, I just stared at the blinking time counter. It was all there. Premeditated coercion. Fraud. A plan to stage Grandpa as mentally unfit. Claire as their medical in. Me as the ghost they hoped would never come home. The entire script. I rewound 10 seconds and played the part again, just to feel the weight of it, the confidence in their voices, the casualness of it all. They weren't scared. They weren't worried. They were sure they'd get away with it. And they still might if I didn't move fast. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos of the tape, the label, the document from Ashwood. I started a new encrypted Google Drive folder, uploaded everything, and shared access to my backup email. Then I texted myself the link, in case something happened. Paranoid maybe, but my parents were playing dirty, and now I knew just how dirty. I returned to the kitchen. Grandpa was still at the table, staring at the same sandwich. It had started to curl at the edges. He hadn't moved. I sat beside him. "Grandpa," I said quietly, "I found a tape." He blinked. A tape. From Mom, from Dad, from Ashwood. I watched the understanding slowly fill his eyes. "Oh," he whispered, "you found it. You knew." He nodded slowly. "I tried to hide it before they came back. I didn't think you'd come home. I thought I could buy time." I didn't know whether to hug him or shake him. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked down. "Because I thought maybe they were right." That hit me harder than the tape. "What do you mean?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "I thought maybe I was losing it. I forgot to turn off the oven last week. I lost my wallet. Janet said it was time. that I was making things harder, that you wouldn't care. I do care. I know that now. But they made me question everything. And Claire, she said you were busy, traveling, focused on your brand deals. I don't do brand deals, I muttered. She said you wouldn't fight them. I clenched my fists under the table. They underestimated both of us. He turned to me, then really looked at me. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop pretending they're just misguided, I said. I'm going to stop hoping they'll wake up and suddenly act like family. His eyes glistened. And then what? Then I'm going to burn their plan to the ground. That night, I moved into my old bedroom, closed the door, pulled out my laptop, and began building my case. Timeline, documents, transcripts. A folder labeled Assets, Ashwood. Another labeled Intent, Claire. I treated it like a job, a client brief, except the client was truth, and the stakes were everything. By midnight, I'd drafted a full report. By 2 a.m., I'd found the name of the notary listed on the forged documents. A man named Russell Garvey, recently promoted at Ashwood's Elder Transition Division. And at 2:13 a.m., I got a text. From Claire. Hey, just heard you're in town. We should talk tomorrow. I stared at it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if my sister was texting as family, or as the next one coming for the knife. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. Claire's message sat like a thorn in my inbox. We should talk. Tomorrow. It was casual. Too casual. The kind of message you send when you know the bomb's already ticking, but you're pretending everything's fine over brunch. I stared at the screen until the battery died. Still didn't answer. By sunrise, I'd already printed the transcript from the tape labeled The Forged Will Photos and prepared a small binder of evidence. I wasn't planning to hand it to Claire, just wanted to see her face if she caught a glimpse of it. Let her sweat. At exactly 9:02 a.m., I heard the tires crunch over the frosted driveway. Her car, same black Audi Dad, gifted her for her career pivot. She stepped out in a cream wool coat, no gloves, as if the cold didn't apply to her. Makeup flawless. Smile even more so. She didn't knock, just let herself in like nothing had changed since high school. Hey, she said, setting her purse on the table like she lived there. Sorry we missed each other before Aspen. Missed, I repeated. You mean when you all left Grandpa alone without telling me or him? She gave me a look soft-wounded. Practiced. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, I asked, crossing my arms. Claire sighed, taking off her coat slowly. Mom panicked. Dad went along with it. They thought you'd make things harder. I waited. They thought if you showed up, you'd talk Grandpa out of signing. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice even. Signing what? The transfer, the care agreement, the sale. So you admit there was a plan. Claire glanced at the kitchen where Grandpa was quietly pretending to read the newspaper. Look, things got out of hand. But it wasn't my idea. I pulled the binder closer to me, making sure she saw the corner of a notarized document sticking out. Her eyes twitched. What is that? She asked. Insurance, I said coolly, for whoever needs it most. Callie, come on. You know I wouldn't. Forge a will. Lie to Grandpa, play both sides. She flinched just barely. Then she sat across from me and leaned in. You don't know the whole story. Then tell me, I said, right now. Claire exhaled slowly. You remember Aunt Lydia? I blinked. The one who died when I was 10. She didn't just die, Claire whispered. She overdosed. Her house was foreclosed. Grandpa co-signed the mortgage and he almost lost this house because of her. I stared at her stunned. He's been hiding it for years. After that, Mom told him no more chaos. No more financial surprises. So, when you started freelancing, barely answering texts, they thought you'd disappear like Lydia did. I'm not Aunt Lydia, I said, voice shaking. Maybe not, Claire said, eyes softer now, but Mom saw the signs. And honestly, so did I. I felt like someone had punched me through a wall of memory. Suddenly, the tension in my family wasn't just bitterness. It was fear. Fear of repeating a past they never talked about. A shame they buried under hosting platters and holiday photos. And Grandpa, I asked? Claire hesitated. He was never the victim you think he is. What does that mean? Just then, Grandpa cleared his throat behind us. You want to say something? Earl Clare asked sharply. He stepped forward, slowly gripping the back of a chair. She deserves to know, he said. Both of you do. Know what I ask? My voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, with eyes that had seen too many winters. The house, it was never meant to stay in the family. Your grandmother wanted it sold when I passed. Wanted the proceeds split 3 ways. My stomach turned. 3. Janet, Claire, and you. I blinked. That's not what your will says. I changed it, he admitted. After Lydia died. I didn't want the money to disappear again. I thought if I gave it to just one person, maybe they'd protect it better. So you picked me, I asked? He nodded. You were the only one who showed up when I had surgery, who asked questions, who listened. Claire looked down. You didn't even tell me. You stopped listening, he said. The room fell quiet. Finally, Claire stood. You know what? I don't even care about the house anymore. Let Mom and Dad fight over the ashes. I'm done. She turned to me, pausing at the doorway. Just be careful. You think you're the only one who can win this, but you haven't seen the play Mom's about to make. What is it? She gave a sad little smile. Let's just say she's not as afraid of court as you are. She left without another word. I stood frozen for a moment, then turned to Grandpa. You kept all this from me. I did, he said without excuse. Why? Because the truth isn't a weapon, it's a weight. I didn't want to give it to you unless you were strong enough to carry it. I felt like screaming, crying, hugging him all at once. But instead, I picked up the binder. I had more work to do. Because if Claire was telling the truth, and my mom was preparing a new legal move, then this wasn't over. Not even close. Mom always played the long game. When she wasn't manipulating people with guilt, she manipulated paper trails. She was the kind of woman who made backup copies of her backups, then gaslighted you into thinking you never sent your file to begin with. So when Claire warned me, she's not as afraid of court as you are, I knew exactly what it meant. Mom was preparing to fight this the way she'd fought everything else. Quietly, legally, with precision. So I did what I always do when I feel cornered. I started digging. That afternoon, while Grandpa napped in the living room, I returned to the attic with a flashlight, thick gloves, and a stubborn sense of purpose. I knew there was more. There always is. My family had never lied with just words. They lied in silence, in what they didn't say and what they left just out of reach. I started with the trunk, the same wooden chest that had held the tape and estate documents, but now I noticed a false bottom, barely a millimeter of lip under the lining. I pried it open with a flathead screwdriver from the garage. Inside was a single yellow envelope, unmarked, unsealed. Inside it, a will, dated 2001, signed by Grandma. My throat tightened. It was a handwritten clause appended to their joint will before she died. There, in looping cursive, was the sentence that changed everything. Should both my husband and I pass or be rendered unfit, I wish for the home to pass equally to my 3 children, Janet, Lydia, and Michael. If any are deceased, their share shall pass to their legal next of kin. Michael. Who the hell was Michael? I flipped through more papers in the envelope. Hospital bills, old report cards, a birth certificate. Michael Monroe, born 1985, died 1996. My uncle. No one had ever told me I had an uncle. At the bottom of the stack was one final document, a DNA test, from a woman named Elena Pierce, 28 years old, daughter of Michael Monroe. And guess what? She was alive, living in Spokane, Washington. I stared at her name. Her photo, a passport-sized ID clipped to a court file. She looked like me. Same eyes, same chin. She was family, and according to this clause, she was the rightful heir to 1/3 of the house, which meant my parents' claim was even weaker than I thought. They'd forged a new will ignoring 2 legitimate heirs, Grandpa and Elena. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was conspiracy. I scanned everything, uploaded it all, created a backup USB and slipped it into the sole of an old hiking boot. Yes, I was being paranoid. But paranoia is what separates survivors from victims. That night I brought the papers down and showed Grandpa. His face paled as he scanned the documents. I didn't know they kept this, he whispered. I'd forgotten Michael even had a child. After the accident, the family erased her, I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. You let them, I said. His eyes glistened. I didn't fight hard enough. Janet convinced me she'd gone to live with the mother, that they'd moved overseas. I never heard from them again. Because she was 12, I said, and our family cut her out. I thought I was protecting the rest of you. No, I said, standing. You were protecting Janet. He didn't argue. I took the papers, shoved them into my backpack, and started texting Elena. It took a while to find a working number. I messaged her on 3 platforms. Eventually, someone responded. Hi, I'm not sure who you are, but yes, my dad was Michael Monroe. Why? I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Then I typed, because your inheritance is being stolen, and I'm ready to help you fight for it. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then vanished, then came back. I knew this day would come. It was past midnight when I heard Grandpa knock lightly on my bedroom door. I let him in. He looked older than he had the day before, smaller. You're angry, he said. I'm focused. You're digging up graves. Someone has to. He sat on the edge of my bed. You think your mom's the villain? She forged legal documents to steal a house. He nodded. Yes, she did. I turned to him. So tell me something, Grandpa. Why do you keep trying to protect her? He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Because I created her. That stunned me. I taught her that survival meant control, that people are threats until they prove otherwise. I never let her fail when she was younger because failure scared me more than anything. And now, she thinks everything she does is justified because she thinks she's saving this family. I didn't know what to say to that. So I asked the only question I had left. Do you want to fix it? He nodded slowly. Then let's go nuclear, I said. And I meant it. Because if Mom wanted a fight, I was going to give her one. And this time I wasn't just fighting for myself or Grandpa. I was fighting for the air they buried, the truth they silenced, and the ghost they thought would never rise. War, it turns out, doesn't begin with a battle cry. It begins with a filing. I didn't waste another second. The next morning, I contacted Owen Briggs' grandpa's old estate attorney who'd retired to a fishing cabin, but still answered calls when things got juicy, as he put it. After I forwarded him the forged documents, the tape transcript, the original will, and the lost heir clause from Grandma's handwritten amendment, he called me back before lunch. I haven't seen this much legal slime since I watched my ex-wife's deposition, he said, and I could hear him smiling. Let's bring the hammer down. We filed a motion to stay a legal block to prevent the house sale until the court reviewed our evidence. Included in our package was everything: the fake notary logs, the forged will comparison, Grandpa's medical evaluation proving competence, and Elena's DNA confirmation. But just as the paperwork landed at the courthouse, my phone rang. Private number. I answered on speaker. Callie Monroe, said a cold, clipped voice. This is attorney Barry Hargrove representing Janet and Mark Monroe. We've just filed a countersuit claiming undue influence and inheritance interference. I blinked. You're accusing me of manipulating my own grandfather. Your presence in the home, the timing of these documents, the sudden appearance of a mystery heir, all convenient. I'm sorry, I said sweetly. Are you upset that we found the real heir? We'll see what the judge thinks. He hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment. They just filed a countersuit, I muttered to Owen. Of course they did, he said. That was always the next move, but I wasn't worried. Because I had something even better than documents or DNA. I had intent recorded, damning and undeniable. Still, the courtroom was packed. The preliminary hearing was set for January 2nd. Everyone showed. Mom. Dad. Even Claire, who sat in the back row behind their lawyer, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else but there. Owen presented our stay motion with clinical efficiency, detailing every manipulated clause, every missing signature, every date that mysteriously predated Grandpa's diagnosis. He handed the judge a flash drive and said 3 words, "Play the tape." And just like that, their story began to collapse. The courtroom heard Janet's voice saying, "He's senile enough, just get it signed." And my dad's voice, "We remove Earl Skip probate Callie's out, clean." There were murmurs in the gallery. The judge raised a brow, The opposing lawyer fumbled with objections that landed flat. Then came the forged documents, side-by-side comparisons. Even the court clerk winced. But it wasn't over. Because just as the judge began to review the will, Barry Hargrove, their lawyer, stood up and delivered the one move I hadn't anticipated. Your Honor, the will Callie Monroe presented has already been legally rescinded. We have with us a new will updated just 1 month ago, signed and notarized. My stomach sank. He handed it to the judge with a flourish. The judge scanned the document, frowning. You're claiming this was signed in December? Yes, Your Honor. And notarized by Russell Garvey? Yes. I whispered to Owen, that's the guy I flagged. Ashwood Legal. He nodded. This is the final play. If they can legitimize that, will we lose everything? The judge tapped his gavel. We will break for 20 minutes while I review both documents. I stood heart-pounding. Claire hadn't looked at me once, until we stepped into the hallway. She walked straight over and said, I'm sorry for what I asked, but her eyes weren't on me. They were on the man walking down the corridor in a tweed blazer and nervous expression, Russell Garvey. What the hell is he doing here? I hissed. Claire didn't answer, just walked up to him and whispered something I couldn't hear. Russell blanched, eyes darting between her and the courtroom doors. Then without a word, he turned and walked out of the building. Owen stepped up beside me. You think she flipped again? I don't know what just happened. We went back inside. The judge returned and addressed the courtroom. Due to the sudden unavailability of the notary of the revised will and inconsistencies between the signature dates and the known timeline of the decedent's competency, I am issuing a formal investigation into the validity of the new will presented by the Monroe family. Then he turned to me. Ms. Monroe, your motion to stay the sale is granted. I exhaled. Then the real surprise came. Claire stood. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear, I would like to submit a statement under oath. The room froze. Janet turned to her wide-eyed. Claire, sit down. But she didn't. She stepped to the witness box, took the oath, and looked directly at the judge. The will presented by my parents is fake. I was told to use my medical connections to obtain a falsified dementia diagnosis. I refused. I was shut out. So I flipped. But I couldn't live with it. She paused. Her voice broke. They told me Callie would never fight back, that Grandpa was too old to remember. But I did. I remembered everything. The judge sat in stunned silence. Owen beside me whispered, well, damn. Afterward, chaos reigned. Ashwood Legal's managing partner was subpoenaed. Janet and Mark were formally charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. Claire walked out without saying another word. And me, I walked out with Grandpa's hand in mine. The battle wasn't over, but the war. We'd just won the biggest battle yet. The storm didn't hit until a week later. Not weather, not snow. Something worse, something public. It began with a headline in the Oregon Tribune. Prominent couple accused of forgery. Elder coercion in explosive inheritance case. Janet and Mark Monroe's names were right there bold beneath the headline. Photos, too. Not the smiling family portraits we used on holiday cards, but mugshot-adjacent DMV pics with the lighting of a police station and the warmth of a tax audit. The article detailed everything. The fake will, the forged notary, the audio tapes, Claire's courtroom confession. It even mentioned Elena, the long-lost heir of Michael Monroe, who had officially filed her own civil claim with Owen's help. Ashwood Legal tried to play defense, released a weak public statement blaming a rogue notary and clerical misunderstandings. Didn't work. By the end of the week, the Oregon State Bar opened a formal investigation. Russell Garvey, who had quietly skipped town, was found in San Diego and brought back under subpoena. His testimony implicated not just Janet and Mark, but Ashwood's senior partners, who had reportedly known about the alterations and covered them up. Grandpa and I didn't celebrate. We just sat in the quiet. The house was still here, but it felt different. Like it had passed through fire and come out singed. Familiar, but never the same. One morning, I found Grandpa staring at the old record player in the den, turning a Miles Davis album over in his hands. They're going to jail, aren't they? He asked softly. Yes, I said. He nodded. Part of me hates that. I know, but the other part feels like justice. He gave a sad half smile. Feels like breathing after holding it for 20 years. The real surprise came during deposition week. Claire showed up. Not with lawyers, not with excuses, with a box. She handed it to me without a word. Inside were dozens of printed emails, flash drives, photos meeting notes. Every secret she'd been keeping, every conversation she'd once buried. "You could have saved yourself," I said. "I was trying to," she replied, "but I figured, if anyone deserves to bury them, it's you." We didn't hug, we weren't there yet. But as she walked away, I realized something. Even the best liars eventually get tired of the lie. The following week, the judge ruled the most devastating blow. Ashwood Legal was to be dissolved. Janet and Mark Monroe would stand trial for felony fraud and coercion, all assets frozen pending court decision, and the house officially restored to Grandpa's full ownership with Callie Monroe as sole successor. After the hearing, I stepped outside into the crisp January air. Reporters were gathering, flashes popping, but I wasn't interested in fame or fury. I was interested in closure. Later that night, I found Grandpa in the garden, his coat dusted with frost, pruning bushes like it was still summer. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, not looking up. "I was thinking about your grandmother." What would she say? She'd say I waited too long, and then she'd pour a bourbon and tell me to repaint the shutters. I laughed. "She'd like what you did," he said. "Not the fight, but the way you didn't flinch." I flinched, I admitted. "Just not where they could see." He smiled at that. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from something else, a weight leaving. I walked through the halls in the dark barefoot like I used to when I was 10. I touched the banister. The wall where Claire once drew on with crayon. The door frame where Mom etched our heights with pencil marks she'd later painted over. And I realized this house wasn't just walls. It was proof that no matter how hard someone tries to rewrite the truth, it leaves a trace. Just before sunrise, I opened an email from Elena. "I don't want anything. Not money, not the house, just to come see it once. To know where I came from," I replied. "It's your house, too. Come when you're ready. There's space here for anyone who remembers what family's supposed to mean." Because in the end, that's what this whole war had been about. Not property, not pride. Presence. Who stayed, who ran, who came back, who told the truth even when it hurt. Claire disappeared again after the trial, but she sent one final letter. No return address. Inside, "Tell Grandpa I'm sorry. I'll keep trying, even if I'm not sure what I'm trying for anymore." No signature. Just a pressed flower tucked in the fold. A violet, her mother's favorite. I folded the letter and placed it in Grandpa's drawer between his cufflinks and a cassette tape labeled Lydia. Last call. Sometimes the real stories don't end with fireworks. They end with silence and a house that finally feels like home again. It's amazing how quickly a legacy can collapse. 1 month after the trial, our family name, once proudly etched into the pillars of Bellemere's tight-knit community, was now more like a warning label. Monroe no longer meant wealth or tradition or influence. It meant scandal. The town papers couldn't let go. The Tribune followed every step of the case like it was a TV drama. There were op-eds titled, "When Family Becomes Fraud," and "The Monroe Deception, Bellemere's Lesson in Greed." The country club revoked my parents' membership. The donation plaque with their names at the public library was quietly removed. And for the first time in decades, their smiling portraits were taken down from the annual Bellemere Founders Gala. They didn't just lose the house. They lost their empire. As for Claire, she never returned to Bellemere, not in person at least. But I started receiving postcards. Not signed. Just clues. First from New York, then from Austin. The third was a photo of a small flower shop in Savannah with a scrawled caption, "Fresh Start." First day. Don't wish me luck, I've finally earned it. I didn't know if I forgave her, but I didn't hate her anymore. Some betrayals break you, others shape you. Claire had done both. Meanwhile, Elena came. Quietly. She arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon with a duffel bag, an old photograph of her father, and a folded letter written in my grandmother's hand. We sat in the living room for hours. I made her tea, She wandered the halls slowly, like the walls were whispering names she'd heard only in passing. "This place feels both mine and not mine," she said softly. I understood that feeling more than anyone. By the end of the visit, she didn't ask for a penny. She didn't want her share. "I just needed to know someone remembered him," she said, setting her father's photo on the mantel. We hugged at the door, a long, quiet hug. She left something behind, a small silver locket with the letter M engraved on it. "I think it was Grandma's," she said. "It belongs here. That night I held it in my palm until sleep took me." As for Grandpa, he changed after the trial. Not in a dramatic way. He didn't suddenly start jogging or join a pottery class, but something in his shoulders loosened. He stopped apologizing for the silence. He stopped watching the door like someone might walk in and strip the home away again. And for the first time in years, he started planting things again. Tulips, herbs, a stubborn little lemon tree that never fruited but made the whole yard smell like hope. Then came the foundation letter. The Belmere Heritage Fund, impressed by our preservation efforts, and the story behind the house offered a grant to turn part of it into a public trust, a living archive, a safe place for stories like ours. They asked me to lead it, so I said yes. We didn't turn the whole house into a museum, just one wing. The sunroom became the archive. Grandpa's old study became a reading room with velvet chairs and a wall of family photos, including one of Elena's dad finally restored. On the opening day, neighbors came. Teachers, librarians, even the old mayor. No one mentioned the scandal. No one asked where Janet and Mark had gone. The town didn't need answers. They already had them. Later, I walked Grandpa through the new rooms. He paused at one photo, a black and white of him and Grandma on the porch years ago, both laughing like they had nothing left to lose. "She would have liked this," he said, voice thick. "She would have liked you," I said. The version that finally let go. That night, I stood outside watching the stars through the frost-touched windows. I thought about all the things we'd lost, all the lies, the silence, the weight, and still we were standing. Not untouched, not triumphant, but real, rooted. The house hadn't just survived, it had evolved. From asset to archive, from battleground to beacon. And me. I'd gone from forgotten to keeper of the story. The kind of story people whisper about years later. "You remember the Monroes, that house on Pine Ridge? You wouldn't believe what really happened there." And I'd smile. Because yes, I would believe it. I'd lived it. Spring came late to Belmere that year. The snow melted slowly like it had grown attached to the place. Crocuses peeked through slushy patches. Grandpa started opening the windows again, letting the air move through the old house like a sigh. The day the final verdict was handed down, I didn't celebrate. Janet and Mark Monroe were each sentenced to 18 months of probation, a steep fine, and a permanent disqualification from serving as executors of any estate. They avoided jail just barely, but lost all remaining influence, wealth, and dignity. Their name, once spoken with deference in town, had become a cautionary tale. Claire's name was omitted from the official court record. Her testimony and the evidence she handed over spared her legal trouble. She was legally clean, but morally, some debts aren't recorded in court documents. She sent one last package, not a postcard this time. A sealed envelope. No return address. Inside was a note written in her precise, almost architectural script. "Callie, you were right. I wanted to be loved by them more than I wanted to be honest with myself. I thought if I played along, I'd earn something back belonging protection control. But the truth is, I helped dig the hole we all fell into. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I do hope someday you'll believe I wanted to do better in the end. I left something for you. It's behind the third-floor panel. I never stopped listening." See, I didn't rush to look. Not because I wasn't curious, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't in survival mode. I wasn't rushing to uncover, confront, defend. I could breathe. A week later, on a slow Thursday, I went up to the third floor, the old attic Claire and I used to sneak into as kids. I peeled back the wall panel with a flathead screwdriver. Inside was a shoebox, taped shut. Inside that, letters, Dozens of them. Dated from our teenage years until just last year. All addressed to me, never sent. Each one started the same way. I wish I could tell you this without it sounding weak. Letters about her guilt, her fear, her envy. How she hated being the golden child because it meant never being allowed to be vulnerable. How Mom's approval was like chasing a reflection in water, always shifting. How she watched me leave time after time and wished she had the courage to do the same. I read them all, every last word. Then I cried, not out of pain, out of release. Claire had been a villain in my story, yes, but she was also a victim in hers. And now, maybe she was trying to write a new chapter. Later that month, I stood at the end of the driveway watching volunteers help paint the trim of the historical wing of the house. Elena was inside cataloging old records. Grandpa was snoring on the porch swing with a sun hat tilted over his face, and I was at peace. That's the thing no one tells you about closure. It doesn't arrive with trumpets. It sneaks in on a Tuesday afternoon when you're wiping dust off a window pane and realize you haven't clenched your jaw all day. I looked up. The sign out front now read, "The Monroe Home, Legacy Archive and Community Trust." But under that, a brass plaque had been quietly installed. Just 2 names, Callie Rebecca Monroe, Earl Montgomery Monroe, and beneath it, for the ones who stayed, and the truths that refused to be buried. One night, weeks later, Grandpa and I sat outside with hot tea and old jazz playing on the speaker. The garden was blooming. The lemon tree still hadn't given fruit. But it stood, stubborn, quiet, rooted, just like us. "I ever tell you I wanted to be a writer?" Grandpa said suddenly. I laughed. "You, the man who refused to learn how to use a keyboard." He grinned. "I figured if I couldn't tell the story, someone else would." "You think this one's worth telling?" He looked out into the night. "Only if people believe it really happened." I nodded. "Then we'd better make it unforgettable. And maybe it would be. Not for the scandal. Not for the lies. But for the way it all ended. Not with revenge, not with ruin, but with something far rarer. Redemption.